Brewmaster. Otherwise, he can't really take out those beetles as easily. And Panda's just a great hero against Undead anyways. Thought I'd point that out. One thing that you do lose with the Mountain King is the ability to snipe down fiends very easily. Especially against the Crypt Lord, because like there is no real heal. They're not going to have any high level heal, so if you bolt something, it's kind of going to die. And by kind of going to die, it is going to die, unless you have terrible positioning. So, one thing oh, never mind, he hasn't started yet. I'll mention that in a little bit, because I can. So, the Undead player doesn't really have that much of a hero advantage, except his Crypt Lord's way closer to gaining level 5 than the Archmage, which is super important because when you hit level 5, those beetles become monsters. Like, they're huge, and they do so much more damage than the regular beetles, and allowing a summoning hero to level up is kind of bad, especially for your ground units, because they're going to get eaten alive. It's just like a level 5 Beastmaster and those Quill Beasts. Those are disgustingly evil. So level 5 hits, and obviously the Crypt Lord's not going to run out of mana unless you decide to go with Impale, which is kind of weird, but you know, I guess Impale's good in its situations. However, since you have an Expo anyways, you can always retrain to get what is that called? Impale. Yeah, so right now the Death Knight's kind of weak, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but the mobility advantage that you gain with not going Death Knight first, like the whole Unholy Aura thing, isn't that important because the Archmage doesn't really have that much of a damage output, and like they're not really going to chase the units down that easily, especially when you can just like run to your base in the time that it takes them to focus down half a fiend. But you know, in that scenario, when the you know, the Death Knight died, it would have been a little bit important, yeah. But you know, I don't think that would have happened anyways, because things would have gone very differently. Yes, it would have. Anywho, more beetle scouting going on, and the human player forgot to build a blacksmith, which I probably should have mentioned earlier, but yeah, they forgot to build a blacksmith. Nice use of dust, by the way. If you see someone going fiends, get dust. Anyways, really late blacksmith. I generally set it up on the way to tier 2, especially if I have an expo, because, you know, you can always power build the crap out of anything. And tier 2 is kind of the key point that you really want your blacksmith, because that's when you want to start power building your workshop, so that when you hit tier 3, they're up and ready, and you've already got a few upgrades to make them even more mean than they already are. So as you can see, the workshop's already being power built. If you want, you can watch his resources and switch to his point of view. Whatever, it's your decision. So Axelav, the pro that he is going to continue creeping right away. And generally, you can creep even if you have a disadvantage, if you do it in this manner, which is you draw the creeps out so that they really can't get to your army, and you kind of have a choke point. So really, what they're going to end up doing is kind of getting really bad positioning with the whole, you know, what is that called? With the whole troll trappers and stuff, because they're going to start ensnaring, and then the creeps are going to automatically focus fire on them. So you gain more of an advantage by doing that. I don't know why he coiled the Ogre Magi, but it looked pretty cool. Yeah. One thing to point out, he did pick up Asgalor, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, the Pit Lord. Reason being, he is going to be going Necromancers, which is an interesting strategy. I use this all the time, actually, because, well, I'll mention that in a bit. But the great thing about the Pit Lord is that he kind of makes Griffins a lot more useless, and you'll see what I mean eventually. It doesn't really happen in this game, which is unfortunate, but the one thing that you will notice is that one Griffin gets Howl of Terror, and it loses 18 damage. So massing Griffins kind of becomes useless, and then your best bet against the whole Necromancer thing ends up being either a Dark Ranger third or a Paladin third, whatevs, and just going the standard Breaker Priest. Priest is probably the best way to go, especially with the Breakers, because it counters both the Fiends, the Carrion Beetles, and the Necromancer summons, which is fantastic. So yeah, generally, here's my point of view. I've been watching some free-for-all games, and I've been going, you know, And I thought in my head, like, one time, I was like, okay, it's kind of weird that an undead is going necro-wagon when there's a human left. I've been told by many, many people who claim to be Gosu, and who obviously have support to, further claim that they're Gosus, if that made sense. I don't know, outsource their Gosuness. I don't know how to really verbalize that, because it makes more sense in my head. Anyways, back up the Gosus. Yeah, we'll go with that. But they always say that necro wagon's kind of the worst way to go. Now, this was kind of weird that the creeps just kind of popped out like that. But yeah. But I've been watching free-for-alls, and it seems a lot of players end up going with the whole necro wagon strategy, which I was like, maybe I should try this. And this was like a while ago. This was like in previous patches, like 1.18, when I actually started doing this. One thing to point out, though, before I continue, is that meat wagons, even though they have the word meat in them, they're really not meat shields. Keep them in the back. Anyways, so I was like, okay, whatever, I'll try this, right? And I got the brilliant idea, why not hide some freaking buildings, just because it's hilarious? So I picked up a sacrificial skull, hit a Temple of the Damned, and started massing necromancers with, and just, like, rallying my wagons to, where the Temple of the Damned is. And you can really beat the shit out of some human players, because they're always going to power build the 2 workshops and just do the whole mass tank crap. But the fact that you're already building meat wagons as the counter, and, especially if you had an expo, and, like, the whole necromancers with their skeletons and their mass gayness, and the whole unholy frenzy on your heroes, which, like, triples the damage, it kind of rapes tanks, and by kind of, I mean it really, really rapes tanks. Especially, it also really rapes towers, and, like, at this point in the game, when they're doing the whole flying machines thing, just to be able to counter your quote-unquote destroyers that you've been building all game. Yes, he's been building them all game. They won't be able to counter you, especially because you'll be able to take down their X number of expos fairly quickly, and you'll still have, the fiends for the anti-air and the anti-griffins, and then you can still continue to either match their production or outproduce them. And at that point, you're going to have so much higher hero levels, because you're pretty much killing all of their towers and their peasants. So it kind of ends up being like a landslide, and, or an avalanche. Avalanche is a good way to put it, because, it kind of starts out weak, and then it gets bigger and bigger, because shit gets piled onto it. So that's what I like to call the necro wagon, the avalanche effect. I don't even know if it's a real effect, but it is now. So generally the direct counter to this is these so-called mass griffins, which I find ridiculous, especially because you're already going fiends. And the whole master necromancer thing, those, like, magi skeleton things really deal some damage there. So one thing to point out is that this early in their stage of massing griffins, just turn the auto cast on web off, because you don't want to be wasting it on flying machines until they're running away, which is when you start auto casting. You also have to get a boneyard. Thought you should know. So yes, Panda is probably the best second hero to be using in this strategy, just because you can do so much more damage to things like skeletons and beetles. I mentioned that before, but it kind of beats the crap out of casters. I'm surprised he didn't go Dark Ranger third, but just because the whole silence thing makes it a little more difficult for the heroes to be casting coil, making beetles, and the whole necromancer thing just makes it a little more difficult for the undead player to gain more of an advantage from what he already has. But the real counter to this is actually scouting and countering, as opposed to pulling a Todd like he did in WCG. By the way, famous LOL moment. I don't think it will ever be forgotten. He got frickin' raped. Oh man, I absolutely loved it when I watched those games. He got bottom hunt rushed by some guy who isn't... Okay, I'm not going to say he isn't that good, because he is pretty good, but he isn't as good as the whole 4K Todd campaign type. But man, I laughed so hard during those games, because he got beat so badly. Now, at this point,